Hello everybody, we are back, and this is DJ and Shawni at the Culture War. It's been a while since I had Shawni on the channel. She was on vacation and did a couple other things, and then we got sidetracked. So here we are now, we're back.
Hey guys.
So she was like, when are we gonna record? So I found, I stopped being lazy, and I got a few things that we're gonna talk about. This is one of the topics in this D&D. As you know, I've done a couple videos about D&D already, and there are various changes and people complaining about orcs and all that good stuff and evil races. So there's more of that. D&D, Wizards of the Coast themselves did an errata change update recently, and we're gonna go through it, and I'm gonna talk about my problems, and Shawni, another D&D player, will talk about her problems, and we'll go from there.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a lot of energy right now. I don't know why, so I'm just running my mouth.
I
So
like how you have the energy and I'm the one that drank the coffee and I'm tired. What is the reason?
yeah. So Wizard of the Coast removes lore deemed problematic from Dungeons and Dragons. Now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna touch on a couple different things that I found, and the guy, the CEO of Wizards of the Coast, who put out a statement, and I'm gonna basically talk about the reasoning and why I don't think it adds up and what they're blah blah blah. So let's get into it real quick. So there's been a mass removal of problematic lore with D&D that was made public on December 13th, courtesy of the D&D rules principal designer Jeremy Crawford's latest edition of Sage Advice, which is a column that comes out and they talk about different changes and things for D&D. Crawford revealed that in his post over the past year, several D&D books have been tweaked. As you know, with my channel, I talked about like the orcs and the drow and the changes that were made, and their people's obsession with calling jorks and drow black people. So this has been happening for, like they said, over the past year probably, and a little bit before that. So yeah, and it includes various adventure books, and he's talking about the different changes, and these are the different books that they've put out new errata for, and that going forward there would be different printings, a lot of which I have already bought. I didn't buy Tasha's Cauldron, but some of these I bought for Taj, and he has the originals. Yeah.
At least our DM has the originals. So, and then on top of that, this is D&D, so you get to create and build your own story. I'm not really understanding why they have to change everything from the root when, say, if you're someone where making orcs not inherently, or making drow, that's a better example, making drow not inherently evil is not your jam, then just do that. I don't know, just do that.
We got a whole campaign where our DM basically has, because Lithids are brought up here too, where they changed the Lithids beholders and stuff like that. We got a whole Lithid that left her pack long ago, or hive long ago, and she just is out here being her own Lithid self, just not bothering anybody, and just doing her thing.
No one's seeing her as inherently evil, so
and I mean, normally, because the whole thing is because of our errata, DMs and players think that these characters are straight evil with no chance of doing any personal flavor, because you'll see that too, where the CEO uses the excuse of, we wanted to give people more options and we wanted them to be able to be more creative with so basically they're spelling it out for you. If I were to be someone that's sitting here thinking about what the reasoning is on the low scale, on the non-malicious scale, where they're just doing it just to try and help people, you would think that excuse doesn't really hold weight. That's what I'm trying to say.
Because it all goes back to, this is your adventure story. At the beginning of this campaign, I was asking our DM, I was like, hey, I kind of want to do a mer person-esque kind of character. How can I achieve that? And he was like, well, you could be like a Triton, which is as close to a mer person as you can get. And but he was like, Triton are typically seen as enemies to a lot of people, but I can make it that that's not the case for you. And I was like, okay, cool. I ended up going with a water genasi because the whole idea of being a blessed race and water genie ended up just being a lot more fun for me. But you have the option. you don't need for the book to spell it out and be super on the nose, because it's all up to you. You create the adventure, you create the story.
Pretty much. So they basically there are changes made and it's showing what the labels were, because they're talking about the PDF, which is linked here, and I'll put in the links. But it's the changes were made to different sections: the role player, the beholder, role playing gnolls, and the cultists of the Yogwai. I might have pronounced that wrong. Role playing of kobolds, role playing of mind flayers, orcs and underlings, role playing as orcs, halflings, role playing as Yuan-ti, cannibalism, and sacrifice. These are all different labels that were changed, and these are the different Goliaths, different traits for these particular races, or there's species, and I don't know why D&D says races. It's kind of weird. Goliath's traits, Kenku traits, lizardfolk traits, tabaxi traits, trident traits. We were just talking about tridents. Racial traits, bugbear traits, goblin traits, hobgoblin traits. How funny, we have a bunch of hobgoblins that fight for our peoples in our campaign. Kobold traits, orc traits.
Yeah.
And then so they also changed the concept of slavery in a lot of these, or get changed, because a lot of these, like beholders, have slaves and thralls, and the Yuan-ti have slaves. They're like serpent people. They have like slaves and whatnot. So there's a lot of that was changed. I'll go over some of, because it talks about the removed text. So these are examples below and are only excerpts, just so you know. In the description of beholders, presumably based on the fact that each individual member of the species thinks it's the epitome of its race, therefore all other beholders are inferior to it. Removed portion begins. A beholder constantly fears for its safety. Is wary of any creature that isn't one of its minions, aggressive, and it's aggressive in dealing with perceived threats. It might react favorably towards creatures that humble themselves before it and present themselves as inferior, but it's easily provoked and attack creatures that brag about their accomplishments or claim to be mighty. And then it continues, such creatures are seen as threats, fools, and are dealt with mercilessly. Each beholder thinks it is the epitome of its race, therefore all other beholders are inferior to it, even though at some point it considers other beholders to be the greatest rivals. Beholder might be willing to cooperate with adventurers who have news about other beholders and their activities, and might be non-hostile towards adventurers who praise it for being a perfect example of a beholder. All right, and orcs, societal, a lot of it is about the society of orcs, them being bloodthirsty, them being, penchant for enslaving other orcs and other races. Most orcs have been indoctrinated. Another portion that was changed, most orcs have been indoctrinated into, this was the original, most orcs have been indoctrinated into a life of destruction and slaughter, but unlike creatures who by nature, their very nature, are evil, such as gnolls, it's possible that an orc, if raised outside of its culture, could develop a limited capacity for empathy, love, and compassion. No matter how domesticated orc might be, its bloodlust flows just beneath the surface, which is with its instinctive love for battle and desire to prove its strength. An orc trying to live within the confines of civilization is faced with a difficult task. Yuan-ti, it's about slaves. A lot of that got changed. Only pure-blooded Yuan-ti are allowed to walk amongst humans, and they call humans meat sacks and things of that stuff. They erased all of the orcs and kobolds negative racial traits, and that has to do with the player characters. When you're building your character, and there are they essentially removed the traits that you get, the beginning traits, and they're like, here, you can put the bonuses and whatnot to wherever.
Which you could have did anyway without the book removing it. You could have just chose to, it's so strange.
You could ask your DM,
and they really pick and choose, because then, they think because you know how they talk about, oh gosh, what are they called? You remember what Jaskier was in The Witcher?
Yeah, he's a
God. Exactly.
No, I know it's a bard. He's a bard.
Bard. They think they always love the stereotype of bards being ladies, being promiscuous and, typically irresponsible. They love that trope. They don't want to get rid of that.
Musicians.
But essentially.
Musicians.
Well, I mean, they're a bard, so obviously they're a musician. But
you don't have to be a musician as a bard.
You don't? I've always seen them as musicians.
That's because people are lazy. But yeah, you can make bards like performance actors and actors, them doing circus tricks and shit like that. A lot of juggling and performance. They're performers. So anything that would classify as a performer, that's what they do.
I like the musical bards. They're always really interesting or funny. But they don't want to remove those, like what would be seen as negative traits. They only want to remove these traits that, for all intent and purposes, you be able to write out of your character anyway. Like it just comes down to, I feel like they're trying to make this easier for people
the casuals.
Yeah, the casuals who aren't really into D&D. They've been watching Stranger Things and they're like, or like The Big Bang Theory or something. I think they talk about D&D and Big Bang Theory. And
or what's them boys that
Critical Role.
Critical Role.
Yeah, like they're trying to make it easy for those people to come and start playing, but I'm like, I don't think you guys understand something. Those people aren't playing D&D. They're watching other people play D&D. They're watching Critical Role, because when they sit down to then do D&D and they get faced with the idea of that, there's a lot of strategy that goes on, especially if you're doing battles. There is a lot of role playing that goes on, and you really do need to build out this character and contribute to building this world. And once they get a taste of that, it's not fun anymore. It's all like, oh my god, this isn't like Critical Role.
You know what's wild too is like, it's not even, it started out with giving the player characters more options, but now they're going into non-playable characters and like the lore around those non-playable characters and the societies that they might be in, and saying, oh well, they're just changing them because someone might find them offensive. Like it isn't, it's a complete change of lore. That's what it was always about. That's the thing that's getting me. They snuck this in as a guise to bringing in more people, making it more accessible, quote unquote. That's the thing, the accessibility bullshit, where they're like, we need to make this more accessible, but they don't actually, like with video games, do things for like disabled gamers and stuff to make it actually more accessible for them. No, they just, talk about how it's offensive to my sensibilities, that type of dumb shit. Anyway, sorry, I went off on a rant. Anyway, so it started out with about the player character, and now they're going into non-playable characters.
Yeah, basically, like this doesn't add accessibility. Like I don't really see the benefit of this, and I don't see where it truly makes it easier for someone to then get into D&D who's never played before.
Don't know. I always joke with my friends, Wizards of the Coast wants to change they want to change all this bullshit, but they don't want to change actual errata that's wrong with the game. Text that isn't clear about what spells can and can't do, or, abilities that you might have that you can finagle it as a player to try and get your DM to get you to do some shit that you can't really do. Yeah. So stuff like that. We
encountered in Friday's session, there was something that we were doing, and our DM was like, yeah, there's no clear explanation of this, but I'm gonna let it rock, because who's trying to sit here for the next X hours trying to figure it out when we're running the dang we're running the event right now. So I'm kind of like, yeah, as a sorcerer, my character is a sorcerer, there are tons of spells that I'm like, okay, I see what you're telling me the spell does, but I need further explanation, because there's a lot of gray area being left out, and that's what they should be fixing. That's what they should focus on, not battle chairs and changing it that orcs are not inherently bloodthirsty. Like, who cares about that? Like, that's not important, because that's all player character attributes that you personally can change if you decide to be that character. Like, stop changing the lore, because that's all things that can be adjusted per person. Fix the damn list for things like spells. Like, if I do this spell can I use it this way versus that way? Or
give me a clear barrier.
Give me a clear barrier. Yeah. Like,
well, we can't.
Clear parameters of what can and can't be done with this. Because there are some spells that aren't just combative, but they're also good for utility purposes. But you never freaking know that if it's not explained. And it's,
or at least given more detail. Because it doesn't have to be just all laid out for you. I think it would be better if it just, okay, give me an example. You know, that could help, like with your spells at the bottom. There's an example of how a spell could be used if it's a utility spell, or a couple of examples. Right. You know, and some of the spells do have that, but others don't. It's weird. Like, those are things that I feel like D&D needs to focus on right now. Not some shit about like how, you know, Ray Winner, who is the CDO, is like, which includes the removal. He's talking about logic, explaining the reason behind the changes, which includes the removal of alignment. Winner says that the changes were made to encourage the creativity of DM players, and many of his clarifications pertain to how the corrections enhance the D&D player experience. But again, the lore, that shit is not that is not what the average player needs to worry about. Maybe for the DM that will help them, but the actual game, the mechanics, that's where you need to be focusing on, because that's what needs to be fixed right now. And it's not like it's broken, but there are clear areas where it can be improved.
Yeah, especially for things like rituals. That's something that definitely needs to be improved in terms of explanation and parameters. I feel like this is really unnecessary. Like, this is just I wouldn't say like a stopgap, but it just feels like it's like, here you go, you know. But people who've been playing D&D for a long time aren't worried about this type of stuff. Not really. Like, no,
they just disregard all this shit. And I mean, 5.5 is supposed to come out in the next year or two. That's what they're thinking, like 2024. So yeah. And then you got 6, which will probably come out in like late 2020s. So
yeah, like I mean, I guess the good part is that for people like us that don't really care about these changes, at least we can just continue to do what we're doing. But it's unfortunate for people who are new and don't care about these type of things and would probably prefer the version prior to these changes, and they may not be able to have access to that.
You know, at the end of the day, this is a fantasy game, and I know like these people want to make everything political and everything has to be political for them, because I mean, you go into a lot of the cultural Marxism and those individuals in that space that talk about, like, you know, Marxism, socialism, all that good stuff, where the mundane has to be the political in order for them to get the socialist revolution that they want. You know, everyone has to be aware or engaged because it gets people angry, and you can use that anger to then topple systems. And all right, I'm not going to go into it too much in this, but yeah, that's why we talk about this stuff. You know, I know most people, especially like I just did a video about, like, you know, COVID and stuff like that. I know most people won't think that this is important as compared to that, but it all stems for something. When you see like people like Anita Sarkeesian talk about, you know, everything sexist, everything racist, and you have to point it all out.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
That's the mindset these people have, and that's why you have them infecting everything. Because the point is, anything mundane, anything culturally that can be used to further the, you know, coming class revolution it can be used and will be used for their purposes. Shawnita's face every time I talk about stuff like that, she's like, no. I don't get why this is a thing. Usually it's just like her face is just hilarious. Anyway, to continue, because I know you don't want to linger on too long. So he continues to say, since every player character is a unique individual, we no longer feel that such guidance is useful or appropriate, he says in the update. Whether or not most halflings are lawful good has no bearing on your halfling and who you want to be, but that has always been the case with D&D. And they keep doubling back and going back to this whole, and this is what I was trying to say earlier, where it's, oh, we're just trying to enhance the player, we're just trying to, you know, make it easier for the players and stuff. But it has always been, if you talk to anyone, especially old time D&D people, it's always been up to what the table wants to do and what the DM has in store for the campaign. You know, you can change things. Obviously, there are some clear defined things in terms of mechanics and combat and things that you shouldn't change or play with too much. But a lot of the lore, things that go on, because it is a multiverse, it is, you know, every table is essentially their own universe, and you're allowed to do these things. And so that was the discussion of the alignments. Similarly, when clarifying the removal of several creature personalities, his update explains the redactions are meant to encourage DMs to populate their campaign with unique creatures that are not beholden to stock personality. But you know, you can't make every society. So if you have a society of orcs, you know, you can't make, and you have like multiple societies of different species. You know how hard it is for a DM to then be like, I'm going to give each one of these tribes individualistic personalities of every individual of these tribes. You know, there are things to culture and there are things to groups and civilization where it is somewhat homogenous. There are certain rules that people go by. There are certain things that happen in civilization and different cultures and things, the rules that they go by that are intrinsic to these cultures. So it's kind of like, you know, at one hand, I understand you want to be individualistic when you talk about the player characters, but that's not the case when it comes to generalistic society of these creatures. Anyway. And then this person adds the writer adds their thing. Finally, on the topic of D&D Orcs, which have long been criticized for drawing on harmful African stereotypes and essentializing characters' personalities to their race. Now, mind you, I've talked about this in another, so when Extra Credits were talking about it, I did a video on it, and they said they were talking about how, like, you know, all these, they were equating black people to orcs, and I did a whole video about this, how
there
racist
will be
it
an
is.
eye above to check out that video.
Yeah, so you watch that video. I think I did a good job. Yeah, Windows says certain passages were removed, the disclaimer added to Volos guide in an effort to better promote the multitude of worlds within the D&D universe. Again, I'll show that too, because they talk about the multiverse and everything has to be a multiverse. I mean, technically D&D already is one, but they're putting more emphasis on that. However, we need to stop short of saying that the alterations were made to remove elements of D&D that evoke harmful real world stereotypes or avoid pernicious implications that come from conflating characters, cultural attributes, and physical conditions. And again, there's this psychological conditions. There's this back and forth of, on one hand, they're telling you that, you know, we're doing this strictly for just making more creativity and enhancing the game, and then another instance where they'll talk about, like, you know, the racism of orcs and stuff like that. They talk about Drow and how Drow have a shared culture, but they want to change that. This is Screen Rant. Screen Rant basically puts a nice little twist on it. They talk about other things that were changed, more like actual like stats and stuff like that were also changed. Alignment to play race, scrap lore, remove some of the problematic elements, and I like how they suggested, like, oh, don't worry about that. They don't make a lot of focus on that. This is the actual Sage Handbook, and I just wanted to point this out where it says, first of all, I urge you to read the Errata documents yourself. A lot of research about Errata we notice on various online discussions aren't accurate. For example, we haven't decided that beholders and mind players are no longer evil. But see, that's not the problem. I mean, that's the simplistic thing that people are joking around about, that they're saying that they aren't evil anymore. But the real issue is the lore changes that don't make sense. You know, Illithids are individuals. Not all Illithids aren't individual, are part of a hive mind and are individualistic. Yeah, we already knew that. That was already part of the lore. You know, yeah. Emphasis on the multiverse. I previously noted that new setting productions are a major area of focus for the studio going forward is the multiverse. We also removed a couple of paragraphs saying that mind flayers or all beholders, for instance, share a single stock personality. I mean, the mind flayers are legit a hive mind. So, like, I mean, there are individuals that become, you know, more individualistic in that others, but most of them are part of a hive mind. And this one is the user that was talking about it in this Bounding in the Comics, and what Bounding in the Comics was using to talk about it. And this person said basically they removed that Wizards of the Coast, removed it out of the lore, and they're just collecting it so it won't get lost, and that people will be able to use it if necessary, and what have you. And yeah, a lot of it about slavery and ransoms. Kobolds not being smart. Orcs. All of this is just orcs that were changed.
What's interesting about some of this too is, like you said, about the non-playable characters. Like, say if we're in a battle or whatever with, whatchamacallit, kobolds. I know they say they're typically not smart. So for
they're pretty weak.
Yeah, they're pretty weak. So say this is an NPC, non-playable character, and we're fighting it. If I cast Mime Spike, this character has to have a certain level, a certain intelligence modifier, in order to be able to essentially say they roll.
They roll and they add,
add or subtract the modifier. Like, that's important. Like, you need that. So by saying, oh, well, we're not going to really worry about, like, we're not going to say, oh, most kobolds aren't very smart or necessarily very strong. Woo. That also hurts people on the end of what I would be doing in terms of casting my spell.
Yeah, it's like no DM is sitting here thinking that all, like, making individual personalities for fucking all kobolds.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's sitting here with fucking orcs and being like, yo, I got to make sure every orc out here has a unique personality, and they're all different, and there's no homogeneity between any of them.
Shoot, when our DM, say we're in an encounter and we're facing like five bugbears, he's not rolling for each bugbear individually. He's rolling for them at one time.
Well, at this point, we blow through things like bugbears and stuff. And he's not gonna waste his time with that.
It doesn't make any sense, because it's like, it just wastes time. Like, it wastes so much time. Like, I think the only time he does like individual is when, say, he's targeting. Like, I'm targeting a certain, like, I cast Fireball, and these 5 bugbears are all there. They all need to make a dexterity roll. And then sometimes he even just does one dexterity roll for all of them.
Yeah. And that's just with the actual, like, combat and stuff portion, but the role playing portion, it's kind of like even sitting there, and then for a DM to be like, yeah, so all of these orcs, if we go into an orcic society, they're all different.
Yeah, that's
like
awesome.
I understand there'll be some difference, and most DMs will make some difference, but God, like, not one orc that's a poet and another one that's a philosopher and another one that's a savage brute. Like, no one's gonna do that with orcs.
The only way that's gonna happen is if it's like integral to our story. Or to the story like, that we're working on at the time.
And even like with the hobgoblins that we run into in our campaign, and there's a hobgoblin society, they're not like good, they're not bad, pretty neutral. They're more chaotic than anything. But they're like, they help me. They like me because I'm strong.
they're pretty happy to be here, guys. Energy, like, they're really happy to be here.
They're like, oh, she's strong.
That's Splinter. Splinter is a hobgoblin, isn't he? Or is he?
Goblin.
He's a goblin. He's just a goblin.
Yeah.
Like, they're pretty like, hey, happy to be here, happy to help.
Yeah. Oh, she's strong, and we're fighting things.
We like following the man with the large spear who's strong. Like, they like that stuff.
So it's just, there's some complexity that he's given to them, but it's like,
it's not like on an individual, like, each one of them basis.
Not
you know what I mean?
All of these creatures are humans. Just get over it. Like aberrations are legitimately not humanoid.
Yeah.
A beholder is not thinking the same things as a human. Like, Illithids, legit hive mind society. That there are individuals that break off from the hive mind, but the ones connected, it's basically a hive mind, bro. Drow, matriarchy. I understand you don't want the Drow to be evil. Oh my gosh, and this Drow sect is different from this Drow sect and this Drow sect. They legit say that at one point where they're like, oh, well, we're focusing on the multiverse, and because we want people to understand that in different multiverse and parts of the multiverse, some drow are not the same as other drow, and they just because the drow over here in Grey Walk are evil doesn't mean the drow over here in Ebron are also evil.
That doesn't make any sense. Like that doesn't make that makes no sense whatsoever. Like, gosh.
It's just a bunch of unnecessary bullshit. And they're trying to hide the fact that they're doing it for ideological reasons. I know why they're doing it. I know the type of people they have hired at fucking Wizards, all the blue check marks and blue haired wenches.
Wenches? What? Oh my gosh.
I don't know what I was trying to come up with an insult, but I'm just so it's yeah.
It gets exhausting because it's like, just can you move out of the way and let us have fun?
Gatekeep what you like. That's what I'm saying. Your video games, your movies, your TV shows, gatekeep that shit. Keep these crazy ass people out of here because they don't want you to have fun. They want to preach to you. All right, that's all this is. Preaching. All right, I don't need to be preached in my fantasy game. All right, thank you. And then they were saying, manga is not manga's always been political. No, see, the manga and anime, they make their politics tied to the story, and it enhances the story. They don't just shove fucking bullshit into there. Anyway. All right, so so this was it. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you guys for sticking by. I got a couple new subscribers, not a lot, but I enjoy each and every one of you, because we're out here trying to get better and do better and all that good stuff. So again, thank you guys for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Hope you're having a good day wherever you are at, and I hope this new year is going to be a great one, and it should be. I'm going to be positive.
Yes, positive.
Okay, that's all she's going to say. All right, well, goodbye. Have a good day. Bye.
See ya.